going to start with a little sort of intro. We have a very short period of time to cover a lot of information. I'm not going to spend my time with the bios on everybody up on the panel. You can read that in your packet. As we go through, each of the presenters will introduce themselves. But we all want to give you sort of an overview so that we have a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end. Why do we care? We certainly know that we have a demographic imperative here, that we will be seeing 1 out of 5 people who are over the age of 65 by 2030. And this is also going to place increased demand on caregivers. We are going to see many more folks, and we're already beginning to see this with multiple chronic conditions, chronic illnesses, multiple medications, dementia. If you think about the aging of the population, yes, there's tremendous opportunity for that, for the development of that growth in that population, but it also brings a lot of challenges. And these challenges must be met by a qualified, highly trained, competent workforce across all of our care settings. And here we're talking about everything from direct care workers to clinicians to managers and administrators. If you think about all of the settings and all of the various people who touch, either directly or indirectly, the older person, we're talking about a need for a systemic investment in that full workforce. So it's not just one piece or another, and that's really the nice thing about the Eldercare Workforce Alliance, is that we are a group of folks who represent this full spectrum. Geriatric and gerontological competencies are essential. So we're not just talking here about specialization. We are talking about, and I love the Arizona medical student who said it best, everybody needs to be exposed to this. When we have 1 out of 5 people over the age of 65, and the vast majority of these people are the ones who are actually costing our system something, the fact that we don't have folks who have any exposure to geriatrics and gerontology is really a travesty. We have a lack of supply. We know right now that we're looking for at least 3.5 million more healthcare workers needed by 2030, and a particular need for geriatric specialists and those who are trained in some way across all of these professions. And any of you who represent rural areas in this room, we even have a more serious shortage because we're already dealing with a worker shortage, and then you put the geriatric and gerontological lens on top of it, and the fact that those communities tend to be much older, because you have a lot of elderly where younger people have left. So the demand for that workforce in rural communities is very, very significant. The implications for quality, I've said it before, but I think it's a no-brainer. It is essential for better quality of care and quality of life. We cannot talk about achieving those goals without investing in the workforce. The interdisciplinary team approach is linked to quality. We have growing evidence of that. And finally, we also have evidence that geriatric training has been linked to higher quality. So if we want to get to the end game, we have to get at those sort of intermediary variables. The challenges to developing this quality workforce, I have been in this field now for almost going on 40 years. It's really kind of scary. I was a baby, and now I'm aging in place. And the lack of value, which starts, I believe, with a lack of value of our elderly population in general, but it gets translated into a lack of value for these jobs. And I can see a lot of young people in this room, and some of you probably have grandparents, but you know what? Unless you die, you're going to live. And you're going to live to be 65, 75, 85, and those needs are there. And we have to value that. As we value our elders, we have to value the folks that we are caring for. There's serious lack of geriatric education and training across the board, whether it's in places of higher education, whether it's in vocational tech schools, community colleges. There's very little exposure for most folks to the basic tenets of good geriatric education. Then we have inadequate investments in education and ongoing training. Probably as important as the developmental training is that ongoing in-service for our incumbent workforce, who has to keep up with all the changes around caring in chronic illness, dealing with multiple meds, caring for dementia, all of these issues that are changing constantly. We need to be upgrading that ongoing training. And finally, there are inadequate financial incentives and support. So who in their right mind in this day and age, unless you are very mission-driven, wants to go into these occupations. We need to flip that on its head. The opportunities for policy and practice change. The IOM, this report, Retooling for an Aging America, was a seminal piece of work, and for those of you who haven't seen it, just go online and you can get access to it. It lays out all of these issues, as does the generations issue that is in your packet. We finally have a sort of consolidated, comprehensive group of people through the Eldercare Workforce Alliance that is advocating for changes that are going to move the workforce forward. The ACA, that the healthcare reform, focuses on workforce. In addition to that, we have tremendous potential within a lot of the demonstration activity that is in the ACA. Every single one of those integration and care coordination models requires that we have a geriatrically and gerontologically trained workforce. And let me say it again, you cannot achieve care coordination and integration magically. You will not do it by putting an electronic health record in place. That only helps the people who are on the ground that are doing the work. So if we don't invest in the workforce, we are not going to see successful outcomes around all of these demonstration activities. And finally, the Department of Labor is also focusing on the health and long-term care sector jobs as the emerging sector for the Department of Labor. So we've got all of these opportunities at the federal level, which then translates into state and local initiatives as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of our panelists. We all have a very little time. We're going to go through that, and then I'm going to wrap up, and hopefully we will have some time for some Q&A as well.
Hi, I'm Nancy Lundenberg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the American Geriatric Society, and I've been the co-convener of the Eldercare Workforce Alliance since it started. I thought it would be good. I have 2 slides, and I want to put a face on the both the people that we serve and then the shortages that we face. So the first slide, I took a picture this morning as I landed at a DCA of folks deplaning from one of the U.S. Air honor flights. These are the flights where they bring in World War II veterans to visit monuments in Washington, D.C. These little boys were the cutest little boys I've ever seen. They wanted to shake every veteran's hand, as did I. I actually stopped and waited for the entire plane to deplane. These are the people that we're serving. This is my future, and as Robin said, this is your future. There's a lot of young people in this room. You probably think you'll never get there. Trust me, we're all going to get there. We're all going to have something wrong with us, and we're all going to need a workforce that has the expertise to care for us. So my second slide is the thing I am most proud of, which is that we finally have a map to show the shortage of geriatricians. And what you will see is that basically there are shortages across the country, and again, as Robin noted, if you live in a rural area, there are a lot more shortages than in urban areas. If you go back to that first slide of the veterans deplaning, those veterans were from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Right now in Myrtle Beach, there's 83. Right now in all of South Carolina, there's 83 geriatricians to some 600,000 people over the age of 65. That's a pretty big amount of people to cover with a very few number of health professionals. Those shortages exist in all of the disciplines, again, as Robin noted, and there is also a lack of training of the rest of the workforce. I wanted to comment, too, that the Eldercare Workforce Alliance is 28 organizations. We've hung strong through health reform, which is, I think, an amazing achievement. We have very slim provisions on workforce within the health reform bill. We need to do more to help our older Americans. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next panelist.